I'm Jody, founder of the travel blog Family Travel Magazine and mom of 2 college students.
I'm Anna, owner of Waves and Wandering LLC, which is a full service travel agency. I'm also mom to 3 daughters and grandmother to 3 grandchildren. Welcome to our show.
So before we get into this week's topic, Anna, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're planning for travel soon because you have a transatlantic cruise coming up. And I'm just curious, I've never been on a cruise ship that long or packed for anything like that. What specifically are you doing to just get ready for that?
So the first thing I'm doing is trying not to pull hair out because honestly, it's kind of a nightmare. So we will be on the cruise ship for 16 nights and then we will go obviously a couple days ahead of time just to make sure that we're there and, we don't miss the ship. So packing for us is sort of in stages. We'll pack like a smaller bag for just the 2 nights that we'll be in Rome waiting to board the ship. And then once aboard the cruise ship, most cruise ships have a laundry service. So I'm trying to really just pack the way I would for a regular 7-night cruise. So I'm not going to overpack stuff, knowing that halfway through I can send all of my stuff down to the laundry. Some cruise lines like Disney Cruise Line, they actually have a laundry on board that guests can go. So you can wash things as, however you need them. We'll be on Virgin Voyages for this cruise. So they don't have that available to the sailors on board. But the good thing about Virgin is, again, like loyalty programs with cruise ships give you different types of, perks you can call them. And one of the perks that you get on Virgin Voyages for being a loyal cruiser is free laundry. So that will definitely work in our favor on this trip. The other thing about this trip is we will be in destinations that are currently 45 degrees and 75 degrees. So it really comes down to packing in layers. You want to make sure you have short sleeves, long sleeves, a jacket, maybe a light pair of gloves or something so that if it is really chilly, especially up on deck. So we're packing a little bit of everything and trying to keep it a little bit of everything and not overpack stuff.
And I imagine toiletries are also an issue because, a little small container of something that might work on a short trip probably won't work on a longer one.
Yeah, for sure. I have heard stories. It's almost mythology at this point of people that will pack for a 3-week trip in a carry-on bag. I don't know how they're doing it. I'm grateful to get 3 weeks worth of hairspray in a carry-on bag at this point. So I think in a situation like this, we're going to rely pretty heavily on the toiletries that Virgin Voyages gives you. So thankfully, we're on a cruise ship where they have a conditioner, shampoo, soap for your hands. So it's a pretty decent layout. So we're going to have to worry more about things like deodorant and toothpaste and hairspray because I still use hairspray like it's the 1980s. So, but you, since we're talking about packing, you really have packing down to a science. I mean, I am so envious of how you pack. So what would you do on a longer cruise? Maybe you have some tips that I can jot down.
Yeah, I think one of the things I do for longer trips is organize all of my outfits in packing cubes. That would be for a different type of trip than a cruise. It would typically be for a trip where I was staying in more than one hotel because, you don't necessarily want to pull everything that you own out of your suitcase every time you go to a hotel for a few nights. So I really, I think in terms of outfits and pack them in cubes based on days. So day 1 through 3, day 4 through 6. For a cruise, I think I would mostly focus on layers, as you mentioned, and things that I could mix and match. I really like bringing wool clothes, which sound hot and itchy, but if you get good quality ones, they don't really have to be washed very often. They just kind of need to be aired out. So you can reuse. And I think I would just take advantage of whatever laundry service is offered.
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to. Especially with airline luggage restrictions with weight and stuff like that, you can't really pack everything that comes to mind. And I know for me, I like to not pack too far in advance because then I second guess myself. And I know people, especially for a long trip like this, they start packing weeks ahead of time. And I don't know whether I think that's a brilliant idea because I know if I packed everything I needed 3 weeks ahead of time, I would constantly be adding stuff in. I'd be like, oh, maybe I need an extra pair of underwear, or I should bring those other shoes just in case. So,
Right.
I don't know how you figure out which way to pack works best for you. I love the theory of packing cubes, but I think I'm stuck in my head but they're not saving me space. They're just making me more organized. And I don't know, I haven't fallen in love with that yet.
There are some that do compression, so they will actually save space. But I do think it's more of an organizational thing. And I think it makes you think in terms of the day. So rather than, okay, maybe I need 3 dressy outfits and maybe I need 4 casual outfits, it's really like, what am I going to wear this day when, I'm at sea, so I know I'll be walking around and doing trivia and having lunch versus a different day where I might be getting off the ship and will need something that I'm going to wear for the entire day that's comfortable for walking around or weather appropriate. And I think if I think about it by day, it works. The only thing with packing too far in advance, and I guess it depends on the type of vacation you're taking, is that sometimes you just don't have enough clothes. You need those things.
Yeah.
And I try really hard, although I'm not particularly good at it, to just not throw in those last minute things. So when I see that comfortable pair of pants sitting there and think, oh, if I just throw those in, that's something you just have to say, no, I don't need those. I've packed.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, and I have a husband who has a tendency to last minute second guess my packing. So we'll end up with 4 bottles of sunscreen in a suitcase or 6 pairs of sunglasses. Like, no, Jim, I've already packed my sunglasses and stuff. But somehow we always end up with too much, no matter when we pack. And speaking of packing, we're eventually going to get to talking about a really great trip that you took. But it's a destination that's very beachy. So do you find you pack less because you spend more time in a bathing suit, or are you packing so many bathing suits because you're using them every day that it kind of balances itself out?
So for a beach vacation, if I think I'm going to be wearing my suit most of the day, I will just re-wear outfits. And so in terms of like the casual things that I might throw on if I'm going to lunch, I'll wear that 2 or 3 times during a trip if I'm not wearing it for very long. I always pack 2 bathing suits at a minimum because getting into a wet bathing suit is just very unpleasant, and I really do need at least a day to dry. So what I try to stick with is 2 bathing suits and then looking at just reusing outfits if I think I'll be in a suit most of the day.
Speaking of beach vacations, Jody recently had an opportunity to visit Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. I have never been there, so I'm dying to learn more about it. It sounds like you had an absolutely amazing trip.
I did, and I should just mention up front that this was a press trip at no expense. It was provided by the hotel that I stayed at. So it was a great opportunity to learn about the area. I had never been to this particular part of Mexico. And being from the East Coast, it was a little bit of a journey, but it was definitely worthwhile. And now I would say it is one of my top destinations overall.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's start with where did you stay and what were some of your favorite highlights from the trip?
Sure. I stayed at the Hacienda Encantada, which is a resort. It's actually 2 resorts. It's that one, and then there's like a more boutique hotel that's adjacent. It's family run. This particular hotel group in Cabo, with just several hotels, is run by a family. It just had that charm to it. And it was located on a cliff top. So the views were just phenomenal. Cabo is on a peninsula. It's at the very tip of the Baja Peninsula. And so from this perch at the top, you just could see in all directions. And it was absolutely beautiful.
It sounds gorgeous.
Great. Food was excellent. The views were great. The people who worked at the resort were wonderful. The room itself was beautiful. It was definitely a great place to stay.
It goes such a long way when the people there are super nice and you feel comfortable with them and everything. Why would somebody want to choose Cabo? We're East Coast people. We know some of the more East Coast spring break kind of destinations, but why would somebody want to go to Cabo?
I think the top reason would be the views. So it was absolutely beautiful, no matter which direction you looked in. But it just had this very, very nice kind of charm to it and was very different than other places I've stayed in. And I think I should mention this particular hotel doesn't have direct beach access because it's on a cliff. There are beach clubs. There are some resorts that do have beaches, but just in general, I think the food, again, I mentioned the people, but it was just one of those places that just captivates you more than just being at a resort and doing kind of resort activities.
And with this being not direct beach access for this particular resort, are there a lot of resorts there in a similar position, or would you say that most of them seem like they would be beach resorts?
I think it was a mix. Some are, some aren't. There are a lot of public beach clubs that you can go to. There's a lot of beaches along the cliffs that you need to take a water taxi to.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. You can still get on the water if you want. And we had gone to the marina and done a little yacht tour, which was really fun. We were able to get in the water there. There are definitely beach resorts that might be a little further from the downtown marina area.
I think I would be looking for the cliff top place though, because you sort of get the best of both worlds. You can stay there and then hit the beach during the day, and it sounds like a perfect combination.
Yeah. It was just that location was so pretty.
And when we think of our East Coast destinations here, like Cancun and Cozumel, I think in my head it conjures up, again, the spring break crowd. It's a very youthful vibe. Do you think Cabo lends itself more to a specific group of people? Is it a good multi-generational spot? Did you see mostly young couples? What did you get a vibe for?
I think this resort area in general it varies based on the time of year. When I was there in October. I was told by everyone, you have to come back for whale watching season, which is December through April. That seemed to be really the peak time. But also, it is a popular spring break destination. I wasn't there during that time, and I think you might see the downtown area of Cabo is very lively. It's a marina area, so there's a lot of boats, but that's also where you'll find like your Senior Frogs and a lot of restaurants. I suspect a lot of that activity happens in that downtown marina area, but I do know that it is a popular spring break destination.
I mean, it's kind of cool that there was an option to remove yourself from that downtown supercharged vibe kind of a thing.
Yeah, and this particular hotel that we stayed at has a sister resort that is down in the marina area. So they have a shuttle. We did that one night, took the shuttle down there, ate at one of those restaurants, and then came back. So that's a nice option because you don't have to even worry about getting any sort of transportation.
And that brings up a good point, because if you're new to an area, like I've never gone to Cabo, and I would literally spend hours researching resorts and amenities and things like that. But how do you choose where to stay when you go to someplace like Cabo?
I think the top thing that you need to look at is the amenities that are offered. So these places, most of what you're going to see in Cabo and in a lot of Mexican destinations is really all about the resorts. I would say focusing on what are you going to do every day at the resort? If you're a pool person, are there multiple pools? Like this one had a adult only section. It had a kid friendly pool. It had a splash area. So definitely look at the amenities. I also, when staying at a place like this, look a lot at where I'll eat. In a resort where you might be a little more separated out versus the city destination, you probably spend a lot of time at the resort eating.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to make sure that there's multiple options. There isn't just like one restaurant that I'll be eating all my meals at. I want to be able to try a wide variety of foods, and I want to try local foods.
Yeah, I think that's really important. If you can sample some of the local cuisine, and even better if they have it available at the resort that you're staying at, it's just... It gives you the experience while you can stay and enjoy the resort. You don't feel like you're on the road traveling everywhere you need to go.
Right. And this particular hotel had both a room-only option and an all-inclusive option. That's really nice because if you really want to stay somewhere and rent a car or take tours and really see beyond the resort, you don't necessarily want to be locked into an all-inclusive package where you've paid for food that you're not eating.
Right. And that, that's a good question to bring up, not only for Cabo, but for travel like this in general, because we don't have really all inclusive options in the United States. But when that option presents itself, do you recommend that, especially out in some place like where you were staying, where they have like the cliffside views and everything? Did you want to stay there? Are you glad for an all inclusive option someplace like that?
In general, I think I like all inclusive options because I really, even though I'm a travel planner, when I go on vacation, I really do enjoy relaxing and not worrying too much about where I'm going to eat or how I'm going to get there. I think, all inclusives sometimes get a bad rap in terms of it's a big buffet and there aren't great options. And I don't necessarily think that is true anymore. I think there are some all-inclusive resorts with fantastic food. I would more look at what are you getting for that all-inclusive? Are you getting, sit down restaurants where you have a menu and you have a lot of options, again, local foods? Are you just getting buffets where maybe, that's not necessarily what you're going to want to eat every day? But I think in general, an all inclusive option, even if you're not a heavy drinker, even if you're not drinking a ton of alcohol, it can just take a lot of the stress away from planning. And any resort you're staying at, particularly if you're out of the country, but anywhere really, you think about it. If you've got kids, or even if you're not with kids, you have to think about where are we going to go to dinner? What time are we going to want to go? Did we make a reservation? The review's good. How are we going to get there? Where are we going to park? With an all-inclusive, you just, in most cases, some will require reservations for really good, really popular spots and some of the higher end spots. But in general, it just involves a lot less.
Yeah, I like that it does. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of things, because when you're planning a vacation, especially someplace you've never been, like for me going to Cabo, I don't want to have to look at how much is this restaurant, how much are the drinks out there. I want to have a sense before I go of what my budget is going to be. And I think an all-inclusive eliminates that whole guesswork about things.
Right, right. And in this particular hotel, their all-inclusive package does include some restaurants down at the marina. You could leave the resort and go eat outside of the resort, which is a nice option I don't typically see with all-inclusives.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice to have. Did you feel like you had any safety concerns? I hate to put this seed in people's minds, but legitimately there are places that you have to worry. So did you feel like Cabo offered you any kind of security? Did you feel more comfortable there than maybe other places that you've traveled?
There is a State Department warning for Mexico, and I think I would always recommend that you look at those and really take them seriously. This area of the country for me felt pretty safe. There was a ton of security at the resorts, which also makes you feel pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
But I think when it comes to resorts like this, staying at the resort is always an option if you don't feel comfortable venturing out.
Yeah, and that's probably where an all-inclusive option is definitely something to look at if you do have concerns. Having some place where all of your your amenities, your activities, everything that you would want to do on vacation is right there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that I think, regardless of where you go, you need to do to stay safe at your hotel. But particularly if you're traveling somewhere with a State Department warning, you want to make sure that you're not going anywhere late, you're not carrying around valuables, you're making sure your door is locked, you're not opening your door for strangers. Again, you just should not venture out places where you're not told specifically that it is safe, because,
Yeah.
Especially when you're out of the country and you just don't know.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, now that you've done it and you've been there and you're an expert on being out there, what are some of your best tips for planning a trip to Cabo?
So first off, and I think this would be true really for anywhere in Mexico that I've visited, is that you want to arrange, if you're not renting a car, you want to arrange your transportation from the airport to the resort and back. You want to do that in advance, because the two airports I've gotten out at in Mexico, Cabo and Cancun, they are very intimidating when you come out. There are lots of people offering you rides. There are different tour companies with their signs, and you've just come from a long flight and it's a lot coming at you. So, make those reservations, whether it be through your resort or through a third party. Know who you're meeting when you come off your plane. I think
that's such a good tip, no matter where you go.
Yeah, I mean, that really will relieve so much stress. And again, like I said, I mean, I came off this plane, I had an early morning flight. It was 102 degrees when I landed. I had been kind of in the dark for like 5 hours, and I walked out and the sun hit me, and
oh my gosh,
it was so hot. And luckily I knew exactly where I was going, what color sign they had, where they stand. But there were a lot of signs and a lot of people. So definitely do that. When you are booking, I think the resort that you stay at for this type of vacation where you are spending a lot of time at the resort, that matters a lot. Look at the amenities, look at the restaurants, look at the room types, and look at the reviews. I've found that there are quite a few resorts and hotels that have had different reviews since COVID. So look at some local stuff. I mean, some current stuff, and look and see, and of course you always take reviews, they're either very positive or they're very negative, but I always like to look at them in aggregate.
Yeah, that's such a good idea.
That matters a lot. And then with Cabo specifically, as I mentioned, some of the hotels don't have beaches, some do. You just want to know that before you go. Do you need the beach? Is the pool good? Are you going to rent a yacht and maybe not need a beach?
No, but you'll need the whole cast of Below Deck.
Right. Which is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely great. I think an all-inclusive option for a vacation like this is great because, you may not want to venture far from the resort. Again, if you're going to book an all-inclusive option, look at where you're going to be eating. What is the food like? And then with Cabo, I think just because everyone had said it, I would look to go during whale watching season if possible.
Yeah, I do love a whale watching trip. That brings up, I guess, my last question. Are there better times to go? Is whale watching season also teenage spring break season, or is it kind of family friendly? I mean, December to April, that kind of encompasses maybe Christmas break and a spring break for even younger kids.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not specifically sure about this destination at this time of year, but I'm always up for a really good warm weather vacation in like January or February.
Yeah, so true.
That's exactly, like mid-month February, I am ready to get my bathing suit out. I think this type of vacation would be great at that time of year.
Okay, so now I'm adding this on my list of places I have to go.
Yeah, I think so.
Mail call, question stories, let's hear it all. From you to us, it's wonder and chat. So grab a seat, let's talk just like that.
We had a question from our last show when we talked about Utopia of the Seas. And this particular person wondered if it was better to skip Perfect Day at Coco Cay if you have small children and don't want to argue over the Thrill water park. What do you think about that?
I think it would be really a shame to do a cruise on Royal Caribbean that goes to Perfect Day and you don't get off of the ship because, as you pointed out in the last episode, there are a lot of other things to do that don't involve the Thrill water park. Are you going to have a bit of a test with your kids having to walk past there? I think maybe, but there's the splash pad that you can take them to. And I think once most kids hit the beach and they've got something to play with and something to do, they're really fine not doing the water park.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when we talked about how kind of big this water park is, this can be seen from the ship. So staying on the ship doesn't eliminate the kids seeing the water park.
Yeah. And honestly, if your kids are really small, it worked for us to just tell my grandchildren that they really were too small. And they were. I mean, we weren't pulling one of those, pulling wool over their eyes. We were very honest in saying that there was a lot of stuff at the water park they wouldn't be able to do because they were small. And that worked for them. I don't know if it would work for older kids who knew that they were big enough to ride Splash Mountain at Disney, so they surely must be able to ride these rides at the water park. But I think when you get them past the water park and there's a lot of other stuff for them to do, it'll kind of alleviate the aggravation over the water park discussion. And it's a lot of money. It's expensive to do the water park.
And it's a lot unless you plan on spending your day there. With so much else to do, I think the beach there is really beautiful. So it would be a shame to miss that.
Yeah. And again, as I've learned, there's a swimming pool there that you don't have to be at the private beach club to pay for. You can take them to the pool. And, I also have learned recently that there are collapsible sand buckets. So it's not that difficult to pack a few things for them to play with. And once they hit the beach, I think any conversation about the water park will be over.
Yeah, and a lot of the Royal Caribbean ships have water slides, whereas they don't have beaches. So the beach is really something a little more unique that you can experience on the island that you don't get to experience on the ship.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Another question we had was about booking the Disney Treasure. So the question here is, when can you book the Disney Treasure?
Right this very minute now. Everything that I'm seeing about this ship is just amazing. But yeah, the Disney Treasure is totally booking right now. So you want to start looking at the dates that you have available. I will say, because this is a brand new ship, and also it does week-long cruises, there may be a little bit of sticker shock. Disney cruises tend to price a little higher anyway, but if you're used to doing the Wish or a Dream for a 3 or a 4 night cruise and you see the prices for the Treasure, it might blow your mind a little bit. But just look a little further out towards the end of the summer next year and into the fall, and you'll see that the prices are starting to come down a little bit already for those.
Everybody wants to see the new ship.
Now let's dive into the latest travel news and updates, from exciting cruise announcements to must-know travel tips. Here's what's making waves this week.
I want to take a minute to talk about the services that you can use at the airport, the TSA pre-checks, the global entries. I mean, it seems like every time I go to the airport, there's another one that comes up. So what do you tell people to do? Where should they go? What should they need?
A lot of it, I think, depends on how much travel you do. Just to be full disclosure, I have TSA pre-check, global entry, and clear, none of which, or you do not need to have TSA pre-check with global entry, but for me, the TSA pre-check came first. And since we were just talking about Cabo, I probably would have missed that flight if I did not have clear.
Wow.
And I got to the airport very, very early, but the line was just unreal for both the standard TSA line and the pre-check line. Just ridiculously long. And then coming back, I had a connection and went through customs and immigration and probably would have missed my connecting flight had I not had global entry.
Oh my God.
Those two have been very beneficial to me, but I don't necessarily recommend them for everyone. So to talk through a little bit, global entry is really something you only need if you're traveling internationally and coming back. And to be clear, this is not something that you would use if you're coming back from a cruise. Okay. There's no, at least I haven't encountered a global entry line coming back from a cruise. So this is really flying back to the US after being abroad.
Right.
Now, this program will include TSA PreCheck, so you don't need to have both. You don't get global entry with TSA PreCheck, but you get TSA PreCheck with global entry. It does let you go through a different line for immigrating back into the US, which can save you quite a bit of time. Or I've arrived at the airport and there's been no one there, and it didn't matter what I had.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is that there is another program that is free called Mobile Passport, and it is an app that you can download on your phone. Despite the name, it doesn't actually serve as your passport. You still need to physically have your passport. But this system allows you to input information into the app when you land. And so, that time when you've turned your phone back on and you're waiting for everybody to gather their stuff and the door to open, you can input all of your information and send it through to customs. And there's typically, it's not every airport, but it's quite a few that offer it. And there's a separate line for that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know about that mobile passport option. That is an excellent option if you don't travel internationally frequently, it is free and you don't need to sign up in advance.
Yeah, we just learned about that on our last trip to Vancouver. We hadn't used it before. But that's also when I purchased TSA PreCheck after that trip to Alaska, primarily because we were traveling with friends that had it. And they were at the gate easily an hour before we got through security. It was such a long line. And thank goodness we got there so early, because we totally would have missed our flight if we had not, if they would not have, they had the TSA PreCheck, but if we had gone at a normal time, they recommend 2 or 3 hours ahead, depending if you're, flying internationally or domestically, we would have missed it had we abided by that time window frame.
Yeah, I think TSA PreCheck's a great option. There are some airports where it may not matter as much, depending on where you're flying out of. I know there's some airports where they either don't have a TSA PreCheck line, although that's pretty rare, but there's also some airports where the TSA PreCheck is combined with the standard line, and so you're not saving time in line, but you are able to keep things in your suitcase and not take your shoes off. I do like that option a lot. I think if you are traveling, probably more than 1 or 2 times a year through an airport, it's a great idea.
Yeah, I've loved it. And we haven't even always needed it. But on our last trip with the grandchildren, they let me bring the kids through the TSA PreCheck line. And that was phenomenal. Their mom went on her own because she does not have TSA PreCheck yet. But having to be able to get them all through and checked in and at the gate, and it was.
Yeah, it can definitely be worth it. Now, Clear is another option that is a little bit different. It's a third party. And with Clear, it's not necessarily every airport. And even if it is at your airport, it may not be at the terminal you're flying from. So, for instance, in Boston, where I frequently fly out of, the JetBlue terminal, Terminal C, does not have a Clear terminal. So I'm not able to use it there. But with Clear, you sign up, you pay. It might be covered by your credit card, it may not. And then you just show up at the Clear line, either at the TSA PreCheck or through the regular security, depending on what you have. And you either use your fingers or your eyes and you scan through. You typically don't need to show an ID, although sometimes you might get flagged. But you skip that entire TSA PreCheck line or that entire security line. The Clear line typically has 1 or 2 people in it. You go to the machine, you show your boarding pass, you use your biometric, and then you're escorted directly to the front of the line.
It's pretty cool.
The security agent is handed your boarding pass, they wave you through, and you're all set.
And the good thing about these, and I don't know Clear, you can maybe fill me in, these are multi-year things. You pay what I think is a pretty nominal fee, but you get 5 years with TSA PreCheck.
So Clear is annual, and you can have kids, I believe, under the age of 18, but once they're 18, they also have to pay. So this is something that I think really comes down to, do you travel a lot? And do the airports that you frequent offer this service? Because it is expensive. It is probably not worth it for 1 or 2 flights a year. And if your airline or your airport doesn't offer it, then it's not worth it. For me personally, it is definitely worth it, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. That's it for this episode of Wander and Chat. Join us next week when we talk all about Lookout Key at Lighthouse Point, Disney's new private island destination.
Thanks for tuning in to Wander and Chat. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. Subscribing means that you will never miss an episode, whether it's our weekly chats or some surprise bonus content when the travel bug takes us off schedule. Stay in the loop and be the first to hear all about the travel tips, news, and stories that we have to share. And while you're at it, we'd love it if you left us a quick rating or review. It really helps us find more listeners like you and to fine-tune our content so you like it better. Thanks for your support and happy travels.